All right, we are back with more housing market data that suggests that home buyers are seeing improved affordability in the housing market as we head into 2024. So we have a new market report out by Zillow that shows us all the stats and facts. We got a ton of charts to share with you here today, and we're going to be discussing what buyers should know about this market and what sellers need to keep in mind. On top of that, did you know that 38 out of the 50 top metros throughout the United States actually saw year-over-year price increases? So we're going to take a look at the biggest winners and the biggest losers here in the housing market. But before we jump into it, press that like button, consider subscribing, helps grow and promote the channel, and I appreciate your support. All right, so the first thing that we need to talk about is home values. Zillow puts the average home value for the typical home in the United States at just over about $347,000. So the home values continue to climb. Earlier this year, here just in the beginning, you could see that we were sitting at about $332,000. So we saw marginal price improvement here in the housing market, and that's as mortgage rates continue to rise. You know, the average 30-year fix today is sitting somewhere between 6.5% and 7%, depending on how the home buyers qualify. Now, month over month, we're actually down about 3.9%. So we are seeing some price declines as we head into the winter months. This is a typical seasonal shift, so no major surprise there. I suspect that this will probably level out, maybe even see some price improvement as we go into January because mortgage rates have fallen. So the typical monthly mortgage payment right now on this home, right around $350,000, assuming 20% down, that's going to run about $1,925 per month. That's not including taxes and insurance. So the actual mortgage payments are up about 9% year over year. Now, the inventory levels continue a slow climb. They have tapered off slightly as we're going into the winter months, but not by much. We're sitting at about 944,000 units that are available for sale. This is roughly about 14.1% lower than the pre-pandemic levels. But you can see that this year we had a pretty steady trajectory, if that's the way you say that word. The inventory levels climbed very steadily throughout the entire year. Now, generally around this time of year, you can see from prior years, 2021, 22, 20, and 19, we saw inventory levels peak going into the spring and summer months. They start rolling over and they taper off as we go into November, December, and January before they pick back up again. And so this year, we really saw these inventory levels stay relatively flat, even increasing a little bit, which is not really common for this time of year. New listings, they're down about 20% on the month, but year over year, they're actually up 3.1%. So in general, we're seeing inventory levels climb, but new listings are starting to taper off. That lock-in effect is certainly still in place. There's a lot of sellers who are saying, I will never sell my property with a 3% mortgage rate. Now, mortgage rates have come down recently, like we talked about, which is probably encouraging some sellers to get off the sidelines, but it's certainly not bringing a wave. It's not bringing a ton of inventory here to the market at this time. Of course, that may change as we go into the spring and summer. Only time will tell. It's something that we're really going to want to keep an eye on. Now, price cuts are abnormally high for this time of year as well. We're currently sitting at about 22.6% of all listings. So roughly a little bit more than 1 in 5 listings are seeing price cuts this time of year. Last year, at the same time, we were at about 24.2%. Nearly 1 in 4 homes were receiving price cuts. Now, this is substantially higher than what we saw, pre-pandemic here, which really is an indication that sales are slowing down, transactions are slowing down. Even though we've seen mortgage rates drop a little bit, buyers are still ultimately struggling with affordability in many markets across the country. And if you just take a look at pending listings, year over year, we're actually down 4.6%. Again, seasonally slow time of year, but you can see that fewer and fewer transactions are taking place. I suspect that if mortgage rates even stay steady where they are right now, it's going to take some time for this housing market to essentially even out. It could be a very, very challenging time in the housing market for professionals, the mortgage brokers, the real estate companies, the title companies, any career path tied to real estate going into 2024. We may see fewer transactions. Maybe not necessarily fewer than we saw this year, but I would imagine that it might be on par with what we saw this year, which could mean that there will be some pain in the housing economy. Now, for context, Sales are slowing down, so there's fewer transactions, but homes are still moving. They're still moving very quickly. In fact, the average days on market is sitting at about 21 days. Homes in general are moving about a day faster than what we saw last year, but they're moving about 2 weeks faster than the pre-pandemic norms. So these homes, especially the ones that are priced correctly and show very well, they are selling very quickly. Okay, now shifting gears slightly, let's talk about rents. This is super important whether you're buying a home to live in, if you're a first-time buyer, or even an investor. You have to understand what the rental market is doing. We're up 3.3% on the year. That's about typical for rental growth over a very long period of time. But you can see here that we've started to roll over slightly. The average rents in the United States is sitting just under about $2,000 per month. Now, I have heard anecdotal stories that we're seeing increased levels of vacancy and we're seeing rent reductions in many markets. So we may continue to see this start to roll over. But I'll preface that by saying that over the last few years, we saw unprecedented levels of growth. If you go back just a few short years, the average rent in the United States was about $1,500 per month. So that's roughly, 30 to 33% rent growth in a very, very short period of time. So it's only natural for the market to kind of cool down, rents to taper off, and maybe stay flat moving into 2024. All right, so now let's go ahead and talk about home prices. This is a chart provided by Resi Club. It's with all of the data coming from the Zillow Home Value Index. So like I mentioned, 38 out of the last 50 markets have actually seen year-over-year price appreciation. But this chart breaks it down in a really cool manner. It has month over month, year to date, year on year. It even shows the shift that we saw from the peak in 2022, how far we are down, and the shift that we saw from March of 2020 as well. The first thing that I want to draw your attention to is that if we look at the month on month price growth, we can see that it's negative in most markets around the country. Now, this is pretty typical this time of year to see price reductions as we go into the winter months. But if we're looking at year-to-date price growth, you can see that these markets in blue have done rather well. Hartford, Connecticut actually coming in at the top spot with year-to-date price growth at 12.1%. Milwaukee, Wisconsin at 9.1%. San Diego, California rebounding, jumping up about 8.6%. We saw Boston at 8.1%, Philadelphia at 7.2%, San Jose coming in at 6.9% here as well. Now, if you go down, nearly every single market year to date saw price growth. The only exception to that is Austin, Texas at minus 6.3%. New Orleans is down about 7%. San Antonio, Texas down about 2.3%. And Jacksonville, Florida, roughly flat, but it's a negative 0.1% price growth. Now, my favorite part about this chart is how far we're actually down from the peak in 2022. And you could see that most markets actually have held up pretty well. I mean, the housing market has stayed rather resilient. Markets like San Diego, they're only down about 0.7%. They're roughly flat. I mean, Boston's down 0.4%. Philadelphia is down 0.3%. Miami's flat. We have Columbus, Ohio down about 1.1%. Detroit down 1%. Kansas City is down 1.6%. Essentially, these markets have roughly stayed flat, maybe gone down marginally here. But what I want to draw your attention to is these markets in red. These are the ones that have saw the largest price reductions from the peak. And you can see Seattle, Washington, they're down about 9.5%. San Francisco down 12%. Portland, Oregon down 6.9%. We saw Denver, Colorado down 8%. Sacramento, this is actually the market that I'm in, they're down 8.1% from the peak. Phoenix, Arizona is down about 8.5%. Las Vegas is down 7.3%. New Orleans down 13.1%. Austin, Texas, down nearly 20% from the peak. Now, the important thing to consider here is a lot of those markets that I just mentioned, those were sort of pandemic boom towns, if you will. They're either coastal cities or areas that we saw a lot of migration in. So, you know, the old saying, you know, what goes up must come down. We saw a ton of growth in these particular areas for the most part, and they got hit really, really hard as mortgage rates went up. Now, what are these areas going to do in 2024? I don't know. It's anybody's guess. I'm not sure. What do you think is going to happen? Leave it in comments below. One thing that we do know is the Fed is now signaling potential rate cuts going into 2024. which could lead to ultimately lower mortgage rates, bringing in some marginal demand from home buyers, maybe even getting some sellers off the sidelines. So, things could maybe shake up a little bit here as we go into the spring of 2024. All right, now in closing, what should buyers know about the market right now? First of all, lower mortgage rates and cooling home values are making home purchasing slightly more affordable. And if we continue this trajectory as we go into January, we're probably going to see home buyer demand come off the sidelines and get back into the market. If we see more inventory, we're probably going to see some more transactions and more activity. Sellers, what do sellers need to keep in mind? Okay, first of all, competition for attractive listings is still hotter than in normal markets, and especially when a low inventory environment. So homes are going to be selling still about 2 weeks faster than where we were just a few short years ago. And there is a lot of competition out there, again, for those homes that are positioned very well and they're priced accurately. And mortgage rates, these impact sellers as well. Even though mortgage rates are easing, improving affordability overall for the home buyers are still constrained ultimately by the costs, which of course is one of the reasons that we're seeing an increase in price reductions on listings. So it's really important to strategize with your real estate agent, make sure that you're pricing the property properly before going onto the market. Pricing it well will attract a lot of buyers, a lot of demand, and hopefully put you in a position to secure a really good offer. All right, that is gonna wrap up today's video. Hope you got some value out of it. If you did, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing. Helps grow and promote the channel. I appreciate your support. Take care.